Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. William Meyer.
Thank you so much.
My cousin worked at Rye, and she sung your praises, and she told me everything that you have done, the books you've written, and whatnot. And the first day I saw you, I mentioned to you, everything that you put your attention to is exactly what I discovered 7 years ago, and I've been an addict with all of it since. So, yes, I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
That's awesome.
We are very, very grateful to have you. If you could tell us your position and kind of what your position entails, and then we could get a little bit into your background.
Sure. So my position is I'm the assistant to the superintendent of student staff services. It's a pretty unique position for a public school district. You often see this role in universities, and you see it in private schools, independent schools. But I think it really speaks volumes to the way that Eastchester prioritizes mental health and student well-being as a key part of the educational experience. I mean, I think we all recognize, especially after COVID, that these two components are intimately connected. That when you feel well, you do well, you perform well, you think with greater clarity, greater creativity. So these are such important pieces, and my role, as envisioned by the district and also as I see it personally, is really to support all of that other incredible work by helping students be more connected to themselves, more reflective, more passionate, more engaged. And all of those components connect to well-being. So it's a pretty expansive title, and the amazing thing about it is not only the support I've had in the role, but having that scale to play with and to be in allows us to do some incredible work. Not just this isn't a role just for a high school. It's not a role just for a middle school. This is a district position to bring together and integrate all of the work that's going on, from ruler that I know we'll talk a little bit about, second step. Even at the secondary level, even like the college process, which in fact has like a mental health piece to it and a reflective component. So it's pretty wide in scope, but that's actually what makes it so exciting. And really, I feel very fortunate to have it.
You did mention something first before we get to know you a little bit. You just mentioned that this is very rare for a public school to have a position like this. Why is that?
I think in part, if you look at the way schools are structured, particularly public schools, I mean, truthfully, these are 19th century institutions. And I often say, like, if you were to go back in like a time machine and I took you to the 1890s, you would recognize a school. It looks pretty much the same. It's square boxes, rows of desks, teacher at the front. You come back to you come forward to 2025. It's pretty much the same. So we sort of have innovated on the edges. And as a result of that, we've almost like built this cake from the bottom up, and we've added layers. And what's challenging about introducing a role or a new position of this nature is it's not a layer, it sort of carves through the middle of the whole cake, So you're basically like injecting a new filling into the cake for a lack of a better analogy. But a lot of schools don't want to do that, right? They're often so wedded to a structure and a system that's been perpetuated over decades. To create a position at a district level to do this type of work, it's risky, and it's an investment. So I think in the case of Eastchester, and for a lot of reasons, I think the leadership, I think the board, I think the community, I think also the landscape and context of the climate we're in after COVID recognized the unique and important need of this. I mean, I look at this community in just the last 6 months in my short introduction with it, and all of the organizations within the community that support student well-being, from the CARE Coalition, the JCK Foundation. I know that's outside of the community, but has a relationship. These different foundations and partners, there already was a sort of burgeoning interest in student well-being. And I think all of that sort of came to a head, and the opportunity to create this role presented itself, and the district moved forward with it. And I think that's why you don't see it elsewhere. It's almost like the perfect pieces have to come into play for a system as sort of old as education to change or shift, particularly structurally, particularly around leadership or K-12 work?
There's a lot to unpack there. No, which is incredible. First of all, my eyes lit up when you said it's a 19th century structure, if you will. Do you feel in this 19th century model with education, how much of it works and how much of it will always be there, and what are the pieces that have not advanced?
Yeah. Well, it works to a point, obviously, right? That's the system perpetuates itself, and we're starting to see, I think, in particular, as we move deeper into the century, like, think about it. We just finished the first quarter of the century, right? And I often look back at the 20th century. First quarter of the century, I mean, they'd had a world war. Little did they realize, like, the next one, which was coming, would be even more catastrophic. It would totally change the nature of so many institutions and governments and structures and mass migration. So if you think about this century, we've only begun this century. If you think about education, is it working to a point, but already we recognize, like, I mean, look at the cost of, colleges, right? Think about the role, and I would almost say the lack of thinking we see going on within schools at this point. If you came into a classroom and you saw students on a tablet or a Chromebook, that's not dramatically different from what they were doing on paper or chalkboards.
They're still receiving the information.
It's very similar. I think where the real opportunity presents itself, it's the access to the vastness of information that's available literally at the edge of your thumb. Like, you have the ability to access more information than what was in the Library of Alexandria in a device that you have in your pocket. Like, that is a game changer. Now, we don't lean into that, though. We still don't recognize that. To me, a foundational piece of what we need to be thinking about is it's not the memorization of information, it's the capacity to connect it, to synthesize it, to create new information from that existing piece. Helping to develop researchers, right? Like, the research is where will really make an impact with this technology. And it's that ability to, like, help nurture and incubate innovators. And I'm not sure we're there. I think we're seeing that. We see teachers really starting to push the edges in certain areas and places. But for the overall experience of most students, I mean, if you're rotating through a 9-period schedule, you're not very far off from, like, and I'd hate to say this, but basically a factory model of the early 20th century. I mean, you're basically, that's not how thinking learning works. It doesn't exist in 40-minute block periods. It just doesn't, right? It's transcendent. And it doesn't exist in siloed, content areas either. Like, it needs to be interdisciplinary. It needs to be connected. It needs to be collaborated. And there needs to be opportunities for, like, authentic sharing of that knowledge. So, yeah, I don't know if that answered that question, but I think there's a lot that can be done that we haven't tapped into.
You mentioned something about connecting.
Yeah.
And that connection to the material that you're supposed to be learning, through this model, maybe not the one currently because it is changing, but the one that has always existed, the one that I was in however long ago, it never connected me to understand the importance, or it never excited me in order to really want to learn about something, which was hysterical because as I continued my acting training, the whole point of you being an actor is you're learning everything.
Yeah.
You will be a person in whatever circumstances having to understand, like, if I'm going to go play the mechanic, I better know everything about being a mechanic and knowing that science and whatnot. So it was so, at one point in time, I'm like, oh my goodness, I wish I did pay attention in school. I wish someone told me what you want to do. An educational environment is perfect because you get to learn everything that you are going to go out and hopefully play and act. So the connecting point, I could not agree more with you. And even further with the connection, I was fortunate where I found things, and in my life, I just always gravitated to things that I was passionate about. Yeah. And I don't see in any education model where we're cultivating and fostering a passion with the students. Again, maybe we are behind the scenes, and it sounds like Eastchester's embracing something that no public school is getting their hands in. So I'm sure it's happening, but yeah, it's and I've lived it firsthand, and I've seen it with students where it's very difficult to, here's a book that you have to read and we will test you on that I don't connect to, I am not passionate about, I don't understand. So I am living proof of the pitfalls that a student can experience with everything that you just mentioned.
But and I mean, what's interesting is you're like innately curious. You're probably one of the adults I find, like as an adult myself, if like who wants to be a lifelong learner.
100%.
You know, like you present as someone who is a sponge for new ideas, new books, new philosophies, new understandings, and I think it speaks to something that you're referencing, which is like to me, learning, like we grow in experience. And the learning environments we've created are almost devoid of experience. Like you don't embody, they're not embodied. Like the knowledge, it's very heady, to say the least. I mean, literally, you sit at a desk, the only thing visible is literally your head, you know, like half your body is dissected. And it's like, in enacting the stage, that is a process of experience, right? Like you're moving through space and time. And that's where also, like not only leveraging research and knowledge available, but we need to leverage our place literally geographically in its proximity to something like New York City, the assets and the access we have, because it's a lived experience. You give someone like a peak experience, like 1 week of travel, I feel like is a year of school. Like you can have so much growth in that. And we've stripped that. Students are so far removed from that. Yeah, it's like they're reading these sort of sterile pieces. The knowledge is coming to them devoid of context, meaning, experience, and it doesn't have value.
How can education be more experiential for the kinesthetic learners, for the kids to really feel it in the body?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question, and you think you've got to create opportunity. So like, and I remember taking a group of students to France, and then we went to England, and this was a 10-day trip over spring break. And oh my God, it was nerve-wracking as a teacher. I mean, there were 2 of us chaperones, 18 students. This wasn't that long ago. And I just remember at night, so it was just hard to fall asleep at night as a chaperone, caring about these kids.
I'm sure. What grade? What grade?
These were, most of them, I think we allowed 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, no 9th graders. That was how we made the cut. Because as a teacher, I think I in most cases, I liked the idea of the control I had. But I always recognized in the space of control, you had to sort of release that control to have like something unfold that was unexpected. And often those were like the greatest lessons in classes. In the case of going on a trip, it's the same thing. Like you know you're opening the door to the experience, and there's a lot of nervousness around not having control over what unfolds, but you want kids to have an experience. So I think it doesn't even have to be that extreme. Like you don't have to go to Europe. I do think travel is like, I'm a huge fan of travel. I also think service is a powerful experience.
Yes,
like
100%.
Looking for opportunities because you're basically engaging in community or with communities you wouldn't otherwise know. And not to get into sort of like neural pathways and stuff, but there's a lot of cognitive benefits to that. But after students have an experience, and this is what's so important, and I found in my own work as an educator, first you have to preface the experience generally by like, there's work to do to prepare someone to have an experience, whether it's like understanding the community they're going to, understanding the place they're traveling, the work they're going to be doing. But after the experience, you have to have space for integration, right? Like kids can have these profound experiences. They can literally travel across the globe, volunteer, come back, and that is so transactional because there's no processing of it. It doesn't connect to their curriculum, doesn't connect to their life today. They put it on a college application, and that was the value that they got out of it, right? Like that can happen, right? But if you can create, if you sort of follow that pattern of like preface it, experience it, integrate it, like that's the magic to me. And this doesn't have to happen. I mean, you're not going to do this every day, but if we could be intentional, maybe like in the course of the year, we know that a student's going to have 3 sort of peak experiences. Maybe sometime I took a group of students last year. We went and we hiked up Anthony's Nose, right? And we did it went across the river. We did some historic sites. But just that afternoon, the conversations that came out of that experience, and that was an hour-and-a-half hike. But for some of those students, there was a little struggle, it was an experience. It was uncomfortable. But then there's this collective success when we all were at the top. We ate, we had lunch, we looked over the Hudson River. So that's, if we could do a little bit more of that. They often say when people try to change their diet, don't worry about getting rid of stuff. See if you can add a little bit of stuff, add a little bit more greens here, maybe eat a vegetable there. And then just innately or by nature, you'll start to reduce some of the other stuff and this will fill it. And I feel like we can start to lean into that more.
So the solution is more that integration as opposed to it needs to be burnt down and rebuilt completely.
I mean, that's not going to happen, right? It's just not going to happen. But I think we find the spaces within the space where, yes, we create time, we value reflection, right? We value voice. We give students opportunities to connect. I mean, you ask students probably, if you ask them when did they feel most connected to another student, or another person or friend or family member, they'll often tell you stories from the summer, right? And because what I think exists in the summer is space and time, right? Literally the days are longer, but it's they have space to have conversations. And if you are going to connect deeply with another yourself, you got to have time for this thing to unfold.
I would also say, too, I completely agree with you. I would also say in the summer, the most experience is probably being had with the students,
yes,
where they're, whatever, bike riding.
That's right.
Going to the beach. Whatever you have there, it's very experiential in the summer with even just hanging out or playing sports or et cetera. So, yeah, wow.
And I even think about my own kids. I have an 8-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter, and probably a lot of parents feel this way. Their lives are so scheduled in the evenings. And even this feeling of that to interact with their friends, it's scheduled, right? Where I feel like we've lost this ability, this organic nature of things sort of unfolding, or you just hanging out with someone. And I actually think something that is in scarcity in this moment will be incredibly valuable is boredom, right? There's value in being bored. And that's not easy as a parent. And I totally recognize when my kids are bored, there's always sort of this threshold that has to be crossed in the process of boredom. They cross it, and then usually they find something or they start to create something to fill that space, which is great. It's great for them. It's just creative. It's possible. But yeah, I just think there's so many aspects of this general collective anxiety we have that we can't waste. And this is sort of a economic model that we've placed on time, that we can't waste time, which is totally nuts. And I'm not going to get into Buddhism too much, but this idea that we can commodify time, you spend it, you save it, you wasted it. What are you storing it for? What are you using? We can let go of some of that because it's not valuable to students, not valuable to the adults. It's not valuable to our well-being.
Would you say that you're in the minority with your viewpoints in education, or do you think more people have this worldview?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think there is a sense within many people that education isn't necessarily serving everyone and serving them well. And I don't know if beyond that people could articulate the reason they feel that sense of unease. I think most of us collectively think we could probably do better with this whole thing than we are. What that looks like on the better side, I don't know if a lot of people, listen, I've dedicated my life to this work. I feel like when I look more deeply at beyond a job, a sense of vocation, education, or really sort of mentoring and supporting individuals in that role is deeply embedded in the fabric of who I am. I feel that deeply. I feel very, much connected to supporting people in growth. That to me is education. It's the expansion of self.
Sure.
And the expansion of self being the expansion of the collective and beyond.
The evolution of consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like, the vastness of the universe. Like we're on the edge, expanding the edge, which is a cool thought. Earlier you had said something. It reminded me of that Buckminster Fuller quote. It's like I think you referred to it as like campus Earth, right? This is all experience, growth, learning. Like, yeah, it doesn't end at 3:00. It didn't begin at 8:00. Most of the stuff we really learn happens outside of these buildings, but these buildings are pretty incredible that we've somehow created this space. And we're trying to make sense of it, but we have students, particularly in these moments of their lives, which to me are like windows that open, and it doesn't stay open forever, and incredible opportunities to support them in their growth, their self-discovery, and really their passion. And I don't know if that's articulated like in the same way. And I often think, the scores and those external things, I mean, it's sort of the currency we live in, and it's the game, and I'm happy to play the game. I mean, I've played it, and I feel like I can play it well, but it also affords me the ability to recognize, even having played that game and achieved things, I think probably most people would consider like pretty good achievements in terms of like educational pieces. I know there was no like huge fulfillment at the end of it. It wasn't like, you get a degree or whatever. I mean, I even finishing a PhD, and there's still a feeling, a few months later, like, all right, I'm looking for something else. So that piece around sort of searching for something more meaning and finding meaning. And for me, meaning often is in those relationships with other people, with students especially. That to me is like sort of the lifeblood. And I don't know if that answers the question, but I think people sense like maybe something could be better.
Just to button up, what I asked you, you answered it brilliantly. So the consensus, there's a shared consensus that everyone feels that there can be more done to enhance the learning and education provided to students. But then people, what you said, will articulate it in their own ways.
Yeah,
sure,
exactly.
People have different, opinions on how to get there. Yes. So, okay. So then that's kind of where we are.
Said that way better than I did. So that was it in a nutshell.
No, but I only was able to button that up because you provided it. So I'm like, it's easier to edit.
I was wandering the landscape, and you basically like found the road.
I wouldn't have done it if you didn't say it. So, but yeah, and just to, I don't know if this will make it in, but just to say what you were saying about meaning.
The problem is, I think we live in this moment of like mass distraction.
Right.
And which is intentional. I mean, people literally, the commodity everyone wants is our attention.
Right.
And I mean, they're vying for it and they're designing things for it. And we're like not even recognizing. So now I think we're starting to recognize this with young people, although adults, I think it's just as problematic. It's like, I would just say like there's really no search for meaning when you're just like no longer empowered in the autonomy of how you spend your attention, like how you direct your attention, I should say. And we're trying to like grapple with this. I don't know. I have these feelings about the cell phone piece. I think it's a tricky component, and I understand like, remove cell phones. I think especially up to high school, but at a certain level, and I just think about my own experience as a teacher, and there were definitely cell phones. Like, it just wasn't part of the culture of the room. Like we had work to do. And I think there's an appreciation, like there's something empowering about sort of reclaiming your attention. And in that process, you then can begin to explore those deeper things as you referenced, meaning, questions, self, passion.
Now, how, with all of what we're talking about and discussing, how the specific programs that you're working with now, what programs, and we could start with whatever. We could start with Ruler, we could start with the peer mentoring. What is each program kind of designed to do, and what program takes from what we're talking about right now to facilitate that learning environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ruler is probably a great place to start because I would see it almost as the spine of the work, right? The interesting thing about Ruler is I would not use the word curriculum. It's like a framework. It's a series of lenses in order to understand one's teaching and learning. And yes, there's like these four sort of tools or foundational components in which it's built around. But the interesting thing about Ruler is it's just asking us to consider, in my opinion, sort of the recentering of our emotional selves within these learning spaces. And the truth is, like, that's a very significant shift, particularly if you look at like the previous century and sort of the models that sort of the education developed within and is struggling to get outside of as we move deeper into this century, right? So it's not just like we recognize now, actually, kids have a lot going on in their mind, talk about space, right? And if they don't feel connected emotionally, right, or they're not able to process some of the emotions that precede the learning space, they're not able to access those other parts of the curriculum that we so want. And I think Ruler does a nice job of navigating the nuance between prescribing and also allowing teachers to have the space to explore. And you're always trying to navigate that with educators. I think like you're at your best version of yourself when you can own something where you feel like it's yours, right? It's your teaching, it's your lesson. This is like a project you've helped develop, right? And of course, there's collaboration with colleagues. It's always tricky when something feels like it came from outside of you. Where Ruler is a great way of sort of reintroducing that emotional piece, particularly across K-8, I think. It gets more challenging at the high school, and this is where I think looking at some of the experiences that exist at a secondary level, particularly in high school, is important to build forth. I mean, my thinking, and even just like some of the proposals around, let's say, SOAR, the SOAR Center, right, Student Outreach and Research Center, is looking at ways we can start to infuse and embed academic experiences with those sort of foundational components identified in Ruler, like reflection, like engagement, the emotional self in conversation and dialogue, while students are exploring, right, more challenging research questions that they have owned themselves, that they've created and are being mentored through. So I really look at it as like a spine and then these existing pieces that surround it.
Apparently, ADHD, the root of it has nothing to do with the fact that you can't pay attention. That's like the result of it, but the root of it is how you manage your feelings. That's what someone told me recently. Someone said it has nothing to do with, it has to do with how you manage emotions and feelings, and because you can't, you're fixated on that, and then that's what distracts you.
To me, feelings are an element of context for our lived experience. And if we can sort of begin to acknowledge that in some level, and part of that, and this is what a Ruler does well, is it's all about the language. Like without language, you're limited in ways of expressing or understanding or capturing. Like when you name something, right, they say you name it to tame it. Like all of a sudden, when you find a name or a way of capturing an emotion in language, it sort of disarms it. Right? Where when it lives within you, and this kind of goes back to your point, you can't name it. It's pervasive. It's dominant. It's like obsessive. It's distracting, right? Then those other pieces you can't access of self. So I guess it's like a contextual element. But to me, yeah, feelings are like we feel first in so many ways. And I think that's something we have to remember. Like, that is what is uniquely human, right? And it's like acknowledging that piece, but also we're not solely feeling. Like our heart is connected to our head. And I always say to students, like the thing that connects us is our voice, right? It's the bridge between our hearts and our heads. And speaking, but voice is not just speaking, it's also listening, right? There's like a capacity in both. Like that is the thing that helps us find balance. And at the deepest level, and stop me if I'm going too far, but this is what I would aspire every graduate to have from Eastchester, is a deep sense of voice. And real voice, if you look at the Latin word, it's the translation is like vocation, where your life speaks to who you are. And for your life to speak to who you are, you have to have a sense of self, a sense of your passions, what inspires you, right? And those are the emotional pieces. And your mind then becomes the mechanism, the tool that allows you to bring that into the world in service in a meaningful way. So, yeah, I don't know if that's too much, but that's
it is not too much. It's amazing. Just a couple things before, because I do want to get into the mood meter before we just talk about a couple other programs. But the feelings. Right. Feelings are the one. And what you said, not only does it make us human, but feelings are. One could probably say that they're the most powerful force of nature for human beings, but also too that human beings don't know what to do with.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do with. It's too powerful of a sensation, and how much our society lives off the level of the mind and away from the feelings. Because when we have the feelings, it terrifies us. And for younger generations to have a literacy of not only what terrifies us, but something so powerful, and that is the future. We're going to have all the information. We're going to have all the machines. We don't need it was, if you're familiar with Sadhguru is, I think he's a Hindu guru, if you will, but he's massively popular in India, and I have his books, and one of his big life missions is he wanted to make everyone feel ecstatic, if you will, and he has an entire program, Inner Engineering. He has a book, Inner Engineering, and he's brilliant, and he's been another big influence. And he said something so brilliant in one of his speeches, I guess within the last 15 years, but he said, we've looked everywhere outside for the answers. We've looked everywhere in the external. The last place we've yet to look completely is within.
That's right. It's the inner landscape.
Exactly. He's like, we've looked everywhere outside, and it hasn't brought us to our salvation. We need to look within. And if one can be in touch with their feelings and whatnot, for kids to have that understanding, I mean, it makes the difference, and I don't think this sounds so dramatic, but, there's, there could be a day where a kid's learning about something, and that kid they just might not feel good for whatever reason in the morning. And it could be really bad. Let's say then that shuts them down for the entire day, and the thing that they were supposed to be learning about, that could have been where their passion lies. So, Ruler that's amazing that this is happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think, it's so true how, we have a contentious relationship at best with our emotional selves in the modern moment where we find ourselves in. And I think there's so many reasons for that, but a lot of people recognizing, finding that sort of language or capacity to connect to self, stillness, space, silence, those are the things that allow me to be that best version of myself as I come into the world or into a classroom. And I think the mood meter is...
I was just going to... I'm sorry, but the language, though, the mood meter is incredible.
The mood meter is a great starting point. I actually give a lot of credit for the way that they conceptualize this, because I think... Well, I have a bunch of thoughts on Ruler. One, I think it's interesting that they choose a word that's like a tool to describe the framework for emotions, which is smart because a tool is disarming, where if it was something really emotionally infused, I think people would be very nervous about it. The other interesting thing that I think they benefit from so greatly, right, is it's Yale, which is a super heady place. And I remember joking with Mark Brackett, this is the last place I thought I'd find an institute for emotions is Yale. I mean, like, they're like the headiest students you've ever met. And I mean, I've been in the different institutions in the Ivy League. Yale's like, imagine every valedictorian like is in one place. This is Yale, right? It's like,
just out of why Yale and not Harvard or Princeton? What is it about Yale that makes it very just?
I don't know, but I always got the vibe of Yale. Like, these are like very brilliant individuals.
Sure.
Now I know, like at Harvard, they did need Facebook to like make friends with people in the room next to them. So I guess it's not an exception. But Harvard, I don't know if it's grounded in Boston, but regardless, the Yale piece, it's disarming because it feels academic. But then as you sort of unpack it, you realize, Mark has really developed something very different here. And the mood meter, getting back to that place, is there's a simplicity to it. I mean, I think it's almost like I almost picture in my mind really a 3-dimensional or 4-dimensional mood meter. Like, there would be a layer of complexity, but the reason he did this and not I is because of the simplicity of it, which gives people access points, right? Yeah. Recognizing, like, these 4 quadrants is enough for people to make sense of where they are, or generally be in the right sort of directional sense of how they're feeling. I mean, our emotions are incredibly complex, and I would argue the other part is we can hold multiple emotions at the same time. We can be, you can have the loss of someone and feel such gratitude for them being a part of your life and such deep sadness that they're no longer in it, and hold that simultaneously. And that's a whole other layer. And I think that's why we feel so overwhelmed at times. That's where I think like the meditation practice, and they refer to it as a meta moment, which is probably smart because it secularizes something that does have religious roots. I'd be the first to acknowledge that. But at its essence, it's like you have to create internal space, like space within that internal landscape. So when you do have those emotions don't consume you or fill the whole space. It's almost like I always feel when my meditation practice is strongest and I'm pretty consistent with it, I can start to hold things at arm's length. Like, I can see them as separate from myself. I can see myself reacting in a way that I would react to something and think, oh, all right, that version of myself is going to have that reaction. I'll let it go off and do that thing. Like, that's not me. Like, that's not the person witnessing the reaction. It's that awareness. I'm not in the emotional state. And I think that's what some of these tools begin to provide.
I want to update the audience on part 3, obviously, where I am now speaking in the time that we started, when you first started watching, to this point. Ladies and gentlemen, our new assistant superintendent, wow. Dr. Meyer.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, we have covered a lot of ground, huh? That's unbelievable.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate
it. you know how excited I am that you're the new assistant superintendent.
I appreciate that.
One of them, along with the wonderful Rob Jacoby, but yeah.
RJ in the house.
RJ, absolutely. No, it's awesome that this is a thing. I'm so excited to see what you're going to continue to do, not only with everything we already discussed. We're going to put a bow on all of it. And then, of course, we got to end with some philosophy.
1,000 bows.
We spoke about some of the programs prior in the first 2 parts. The peer mentoring program. Can you take me through what that is and what that looks like and what we're trying to do with it now?
Yeah, actually, it exists at several of the building levels in terms of having students play the role of mentors to other students. In fact, there's discussion now to bring this out more extensively at the middle school. But one of the exciting pieces is thinking about the place of this work at the high school. So peer mentoring, which I think it's important to recognize sort of the distinction of this. you're not expecting students to offer clinical support, or you're not expecting them to provide like a level of counseling that they would get from an adult or a professional and someone trained within the field. But what you're trying to do is basically utilize them as access points to creating spaces for students to connect more connect with their peers, and thus feel like a deeper sense of connection within the broader community. We all know that adults, no matter like the level of their compassion, their passion, their connection, it's still different than that of a peer-to-peer. So I am excited to think about how we can continue to grow this at the high school, and particularly use it also as a model for leadership positions, because peer mentoring, and I think this is sort of an evolution of how we think about leadership. Rather than filling a space, it's about creating a space, right? Like that's really a strong leader. So onboarding juniors and seniors to be mentors to 9th and 10th graders is a great model, something we see at the post-secondary level in a lot of universities and colleges. We also see this within high schools. And that's an exciting piece. And I think an element of that will also go nicely as we begin to sort of roll out an advisory and a more deliberate and intentional curriculum at the high school level around SEL and supporting students in their whole well-being.
So actually, I am filming something probably at the end of the month at Greenvale where they want to highlight the peer mentoring, and I'm going to do it inside the classroom on it. And so that's going to be...
so that's why, like, and I think Cara DiPolito, if I'm saying that right, Cara DiPolito, is talking about bringing something to the middle school. And there's like the SAVE program, it's the program through Sandy Hook Promise that has a peer mentoring elements. But I think the high school is like the last piece to formalize it.
Gotcha. Okay.
And scale it, I guess, would be.
Sure. No, that's really cool. And I think it'll be very efficient in the high school. I think this is a great program or idea, what have you. So how are these peer mentors selected as upperclassmen? Will they volunteer to do this, or is there a little bit more of a committee, if you will, that's kind of selecting certain kids where, you know, if I see a senior or a junior with a lot of leadership qualities, are kids being vetted in a way?
Absolutely, yeah. So you would definitely have an application process, and an application in itself vets students. But obviously, if you had students you thought would be great, you would want to encourage them to apply. Generally, in other districts that I've worked, when we've sort of rolled this out, the best way to do it is you also have a committee. So you have students apply. You might include some type of interview process. What's nice about, I think, an effective interview process is one where you do group interviews, where you bring students together, like you bring a lot of students who apply, let's say 30 students together in a room. You put them in groups of 5 or 6. You give a task, and you see how they work together. In reality, when you're trying to have that kind of scale, like to provide peer mentors for, let's say you have 2 mentors for every 10 freshmen or 9th graders, you're going to need like 80 to 100 mentors, right? So the majority are going to be accepted. You don't lead with that, but what you're trying to do is take them through a process that's valuable in them going through it, and then just trying to make sure what's their level of commitment, or like how mature are they? Would they be able to basically handle a group of 10 or 12 younger underclassmen? Would they work well with another partner? So those are all things. Often, too, after a group interview, you'd share that list with the faculty. Okay. And I more or less look at it as like, is there anyone of concern? Is there anyone who's exceptional and is like a must in this program? Please just identify those individuals and share with us your feedback. And that usually is pretty effective. Then obviously it falls upon the program. We have to offer some level of training. Right. So at the end of the summer, in June, it's sometimes nice to do a welcome event for the peer mentors. Just welcome them in, plant the seeds. They go away for the summer. At the end of August, when they come back, sometimes for sports, whatever, you might do this in the evening. You bring them back. You start to actually give them some more directive pieces. For example, this could look like, hey, we're going to bring in our ninth graders the day before and have them tour the building. And you're going to play a role in leading those tours, showing them where their classes are, maybe offering them some tips, some icebreakers. And you have to have ongoing training that's very timely to when they're going to lead their next peer mentor session.
Yeah. Well, it sounds a little bit like what are they called? When you go to college and you're about to start at college.
Like a student ambassador?
Yeah, or the students who are walking the kids around.
Yeah, like a campus tour. And this is that's a low level task, so most people feel comfortable with that. The challenging for most students is like, hey, can you lead like a conversation around this topic with the group? And obviously, if anything surfaces of concern, you need to bring that to our attention. But more than anything, you're trying to formalize these, I don't know if intergenerational is the right word, but cross-grade level relationships. Most students, if you ask them, like, hey, what was useful when you went to high school? They'll often say things like sports teams, clubs, because then they had access to other students in different grades. Or my older sibling introduced me. This is like preempting that in a way that is, I think, generally more constructive than what can sometimes not be the most productive relationships.
The example that I was going to give before you even mentioned the clubs was, I remember when I was a sixth grader. So when I was a sixth grader, I was in the high school players club because my director would always look for middle schoolers who, would one day take the reins. So I was lucky enough to be asked to do it in the sixth grade. I remember how much I bonded with the high schoolers and the seniors, and and they were all incredible. They were but I felt like so cool being like the sixth grader who was like, I remember that was the first time I was in the passenger seat of a car, in a senior's car, because we went to get ice cream after a rehearsal or whatever. It was the whole group, but it just it made me feel so important and special. And this year, I have to give a shout out to our Players Club president and vice president. They did an amazing job. So they're seniors. They did an amazing job of reaching out to the freshmen and sophomores to acclimate them to what the club is all about, to a lot of traditions that we have.
That's awesome.
They did such an amazing job, and I'm happy to give them the shout out here. But it's exactly what you're saying.
You're just formalizing it.
And it's so effective, though, too, because one of the advantages, if I'm running the club or whatnot, is that I've seen is that, students there is an element of being able to relate to someone who is either your age or closer to you in your age, or who have walked in your footsteps or whatnot. So what you said in the beginning of outlining the peer mentoring program, where you said, teachers and administrators, there is no substitute with the connectivity that peers provide.
That's right.
And I think that's tremendously effective.
It's a far more authentic relationship that can navigate specific aspects of adolescence that we can only, as adults, sort of scratch the surface at. So, but it's the double win, because you're also basically supporting the growth of your leaders through the training. So you're both sort of leveling up your upperclassmen, and you're helping the transition of your ninth graders.
And I think that's a great thing for the upperclassmen to embrace that, because then, and not just for the sake of it, but then there's a whole new sense of importance that they're discovering. And
that's right.
That there's a lot of intrinsic value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this, because you did throw around some numbers just out of curiosity. Is the goal to make sure that every freshman and sophomore has a specific peer mentor? You mentioned groups too. Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, and I don't want to speak beyond what the vision of the high school administration would be, because I think there would be more conversation around this. But realistically, I think you want to get quality mentors And in order to have quality mentors, you generally would put them like a partner, co-mentors with a group of like probably 10 to 12, like 12 to 8 students is a sweet spot. If one-to-one is almost unrealistic and it's unmanageable. And at this point, like you want the quality of leadership versus the quantity of numbers of mentors. And I would see something like this at a larger scale reflecting that.
Right. No, that makes sense. Yeah, because it could be a logistical
Not
nightmare.
everyone is up for that role, nor are they interested,
Right.
And I that's not what we're looking to do, but I think there are a lot of exceptional students who would be great in basically helping to be ambassadors for new students entering high school. And what's interesting to think about, and we talk about ninth graders, but honestly, at any grade level. So what this might look like is you might have a separate group specifically for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade new students. You probably would have 2 here because we get so many, but they have a different set of needs. And what's sometimes nice is if you can find mentors who also were new to the high school, didn't come through the middle school. Yeah. That's like a nice complement to those circumstances.
No, this sounds like it's going to be very effective. So it's great that this is a thing. The SOAR Center. I don't think we've touched on the SOAR Center yet. So
yeah.
What is the SOAR Center?
So the Student Outreach and Research Center is really a way of sort of reimagining student wellness and well-being. A component of that will be a clinical component, and this is through our partnership with the WJCS and providing a social worker in the location. This is going to be a location. We've already sort of earmarked it between the middle and high school on this campus. But that social worker will be available across the district for our students, K-12. But what we look at this is not only to provide clinical support, but what we want to build it out is use it as a hub for things like our relationships and partnerships with local universities, hospitals, internships. We have a group of students who are doing a tutorial at White Plains Hospital right now. We just took a group of students to a Women in the Law conference. Like this would be a place where we could help organize a speaker series that we might bring in, student speaker series, also research opportunities. And I think this is an exciting piece, both for our faculty, but also our students as we roll out AP Seminar and AP Research. They're going to be looking for data-rich places or research experiences where they can focus on whatever their question of inquiry is. And I look at this center as something that is a hub for both sort of like the SEL work in the district, a clinical piece, but also this integrated research component, which then sort of brings the feedback loop back into the curriculum. One of the issues with SEL and wellness, any work around this, is there's a lot of challenges with it. One is it's trying to find space within a system that's very linear in its nature and its structure.
We've talked a lot about
yes. Okay. So, and I would think about SEL as circular, right? So you're trying to basically fit this circle in this box. What the Source Center is trying to do is completely reframe that in a way that it's integrated into the fabric of the curriculum in some ways as an access point, almost like a library. Like you would go to a library to access additional information and research. As we build out this location, we build out the work of this, it would be through this that students would have opportunities for service experiences, internship experiences, research components and semesters of research, as well as the clinical piece. Gotcha. And I think that's what's really exciting because unfortunately, like if there's a clinical component, it often stands alone, retrofitted onto the school. If there's partnerships, they're often sort of like haphazard and they might exist, but one partnership might be through a department, another one might be through a school, a person. It's a centering conceptual framework to bring this stuff together. And we have so much of it as is. JCK Foundation, sorry.
No, please.
The JCK Foundation, the CARE Coalition, the Harris Project,
yeah.
the CODA work. It's like there's so many layers of it. And And this will be a way of unifying that.
Well, and that was my next topic to get to, were all those organizations, because I've now witnessed a lot of those organizations in action, and they're wonderful. But I do want to ask a couple more questions about the SOAR Center. So there won't be a physical location for this place. It's just going to be a network of...
No, there is a physical location.
Oh, there is?
Yeah. So there is a physical location which will be built out. It's like room 142. I think it's a space that it's currently used for different purposes, but it's a central space. So there will be a physical location. Oh, wow. There will also be a physical person working out of that location. Okay, yeah. But as we build it out, it will also serve multiple purposes in terms of, it might be a place where we bring in our interns. Like, we don't have any capacity. Currently, we have 6 students working at White Plains Hospital through the tutorial program in the evenings. We don't have any space or center in our school currently dedicated to sort of the integration and the processing of that work, thinking about, is there application from that experience to your academic work? And I think what's exciting, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but as we sort of reimagine the schedule and we think about that component, the idea of even year-long electives, I could foresee in the future electives that have a research basis in their nature. These would be like for juniors and seniors that could access these. And this is where a center of this nature would be like a very integral part of supporting. Let's say one of the research components is in psychology or sociology, right? We have an AP Psych class, it's loaded. Well, when a student finishes AP Psych, what if they want to do some next level research within the field of psychology? We don't have a class for it. We don't have a space for it, but we actually do have expertise in it. Now we could bring people in. This could be like a more of a cohort model. Which is like a more intimate model, which is exactly what our students are going to experience in college. We're going back to those groups of 10 or 12. Like, that is how I would start to envision this. So next year, we're actually, like in the next month, we're going to start to have someone in that space. As we build it out, we build it into the curriculum. Gotcha. And that basically is like both the physical and the intellectual connection.
And its primary objective would be what, if you had to put an umbrella term?
I mean, I would look at it as like the heart of the heart. Okay. So it is focusing, its primary objective is to be a centering hub around our SEL work in the district, but looking at that work from a complexity of layers beyond just pushing in a ruler lesson. This is like the connection eventually to our partnerships. If we have partnerships with Sarah Lawrence College, if we have partnerships with White Plains Hospital, if we have partnerships with New York Presbyterian, like we can have a centering piece that helps organize this. And I could see we have a clinical support, but down the road we might have, let's say, a director of the center, or we have someone who's stipended to help support speaker series, additional components. So it expands the breadth of experience for students, but it does it in a very purposeful and focused way in conjunction with the general work that's going on in the school. Sure. And I think that is really what's exciting, because you think about it, you have like science research, right? We don't even have a humanities research class, but and I don't want to misspeak, but like in that nature of looking at maybe this research of the social sciences. So this would offer almost like a library, a centering place of this, almost like an institute of sorts.
For social emotional learning.
Exactly, as expansive as we can think about it.
And you mentioned, and this is why I have so many questions about it, because it sounds really appetizing for students to be a part of and take advantage of. You mentioned there's a couple students who are working at White Plains Hospital. Yeah. Can you tell me what that looks like?
So we were invited into the program. I think it's the second year of the program. We have 6 students there. Basically, they applied to be a part of this opportunity. They're going to White Plains Hospital every Wednesday night, and they do almost a micro residency in different departments where they get like a lecture or an introduction, a session with a physician within that field, and then they get to do field work like going to that wing of the hospital, seeing that surgery in action, getting a sense of that level of care. And it's like a buffet of all of the work in the hospital. So it's pretty cool. What would be amazing is as we build it out, especially if students are doing this in 10th grade, 11th grade, my question is always like, what's next? And then we think about, okay, maybe we can start to build some more formalized partnerships with these local hospitals where students can have follow-up experiences that are more specific and more sustained in nature, where they spend a semester with a specific doctor or field.
Yeah, that's quite the opportunity to have that experience in high school. And I think the key word like that you tapped into there and about this, and as I think becomes more important in just how we think about education in general, like experience, right? So like you and we've talked about this, like you can have as much in the head as you can like read as many books, you can have as many lectures, you can take as many tests, but it to complement it with experience is like what allows one to really integrate the work at another level. The Source Center, is it, if I'm a freshman, can I participate within this? Because I think you did mention that some of the students who are working at White Plains Hospital, they're sophomores and juniors. So this isn't exclusive to seniors.
No, I mean, one, there's a clinical piece which is available across the district. So let's say I was just even looking for a deeper level of professional clinical support, like with the social worker. So that's it, because that's kind of our link into this whole sort of this network of therapeutic services, okay? But then what I would hope is as we build it out again with intentionality, so there's experiences available for 9th graders, appropriate for 10th graders, 11th graders might be a different piece in my 12th grade. Like it's real, authentic post-secondary research. And what I would love to see too as part of that, hosted by that center, is a symposium in the spring, ultimately, which highlights the work of the students who've been a part of it. I think one of the interesting things to think about, and again, this is something down the road, but it would be very, very exciting to think if there was opportunities to establish some form of independent studies, right? Where, and this goes back to the peer mentoring idea, but in this case, it's student-teacher mentoring in the form of an independent study, which might transcend any specific course that we currently offer. So someone might want to do like an independent study looking specifically at like neuroscience and the impact of stress on the adolescent brain. And then all that's like a junior senior level project. They would engage in a pretty substantial research process. Maybe through the Source Center, we also have panels, almost like a dissertation, to review the research through the proposal, the end, but then ultimately they present their work in some public symposium. So these are models that exist. I think what would be unique about this is that sort of wellness piece, but the wellness piece is pretty broad in nature. And I think it's exciting. To me, the wellness piece and what the this center could offer is really an opportunity for students to engage in their own passions and interests in a next level. I mean, if we talk about the curriculum part, the curriculum is like we build out more robustly our current offerings of APs. But what we have to recognize is when we reach the end of the runway of APs, like now the plane's going to take flight. And the real reason we want to get to the end of that runway is the next thing that we want to be able to offer these students. And the next thing is, like I said, seminars, research seminars, independent study projects, internships, as experiential and authentic as possible and as hyper individualized as you can make it. That's the ultimate goal, right? Like you would want this in theater, right? Like the ultimate test is right to in some ways to be on that stage alone, like to be the master of it, to not the author of the piece that you present. Maybe it's like you author the dialogue, the monologue, you present it, you perform it. there's an audience for it, like all of those things. Like this is the same thing we would want academically. And I don't want to go too far off on this, but it's like we're not at that place. And I'm not saying Eastchester, I'm saying generally most high schools in America are not at that place. And you can see that reflected in the whole senior slump. Like we think the end goal is college. Like the college is not the end goal. So like students get into college and it's as if they just got a pass to shut everything down. Like we're going to turn off all the engines, all the lights, and we're just going to coast and hope this thing reaches like the end with whatever momentum got us to this point. No, what would be exciting is like there's some type of capstone experience students are having that is a moment for them and their peers and maybe even family members and friends to see, and it doesn't have to be the breadth, but a particular aspect of growth reflective of their journey over the last 4 years, you know? And like you got to have intentional moments of reflection, but you also have to have something at stake, right? Or like an audience, right? Like a performance, like you put something at stake and it electrifies it in a way. And then students really feel as though they've earned something, they've like reached something, they can acknowledge like a peak. That's so important. But that's a way to imagine that.
I love what you said, though, too, about the individuality of it and how hyper-specific it has to be with one's individual approach, because that is what will separate everybody. And I think we touched upon that I've heard this from other people regarding college essays, but I think you mentioned this, too, in part one, about how specific the student really wants to present themselves in order to get to an elite school. Yeah, that would be to provide that pathway with all of this opportunity, but while focusing on that objective is because that's what's going to make people stand out.
That's right.
And the college thing, too, I will never forget when I was leaving high school. I mean, I guess I was very fortunate where, you know, I knew where my passion was and I knew what I wanted to do and I knew where I was going to go. So I don't want to knock anybody when I say this, but it was fascinating to me how many... When I would speak to my peers, the conversation wasn't, well, what do you want to do? What are you interested in, et cetera? The conversation was, oh, I'm going to this school. I'm going here.
Yeah.
I'm going to this place. I'm going. And it just never, like in my head, I would say, you or your family's paying a lot of money for this. Do you have any idea of what it is that you might want to do with what you're paying? And again, not to, you know, obviously, right, you trust that they're going to find it and et cetera, but I just never understood why the conversation was never about what are you interested in?
Yeah.
And if this will provide that experience for students, so one, they can approach it on their own, but then with everything, the independent study or working a job in whatever, wherever it presents itself, that's life-changing.
Yeah, completely.
I mean, you'll have a student who thinks that they want to do something, and then either they might find their passion or they might find the thing that they thought they wanted to do, and they're like, oh, wait, no, this might not be for me.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I had that.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because
how many years I would have saved, like, knowing, like, wait, I want to do this with what I want to do, and all this is
But that you're right. I mean, the passion, people are excited about the school, like the idea of the experience, like a college, versus necessarily like how that might align or not aligned with who they are.
Right.
But you can't fault them because it's not like we've done much to nurture it.
Right.
I actually had a really fascinating call this week with a former student who reached out to me out of the blue, and I taught him in 9th grade, and he's now a junior at Boston College, and he wanted to jump on a Zoom call. So I said, sure. So we jumped on a Zoom call. He's studying Buddhism in Nepal at the moment as part of a study abroad program. And he's in a monastery. No, what's crazy about this is like we studied this. I was his 9th grade world history teacher. And obviously, you know, we've discussed, I have a real interest in all kinds of world religions. But that, you seed it early, you find the passion, and then you just continue to go with it. And And he was telling me wild stories. Like they were trying to, him and one other student from BC who was with him on this program, were trying to figure out what they were going to do for these 10 days off that they had. So they like had these countries that were within some achievable distance on a wheel. They spun the wheel. They landed on Vietnam, but in order to get to Vietnam, they had to go through India. So in order to get the transfer was in Delhi. So at the time it was a religious festival. So they decided to stay in Delhi. And he's telling me this story. It's during one of these, I think the high holiday of Holi is, if I'm saying that right, Holi. And his friend, actually, visa wasn't working. So he went ahead without his friend. This is a junior in college on his own, just experiencing it, right? Like, literally having, from what he's describing to me, 2 to 3 like life experiences in a day, and then they go to Vietnam. He's disappointed by Vietnam because he feels it's too touristy. Well, I mean, compared to India, right? And the fact and then now he's back in Kathmandu and he's telling me like in 2 months he's going to do the track to Everest. But like, I'm not saying you need to know the specific answer, right. But if you can hook any type of passion or interest or curiosity and run that thread as far as you can till it runs out, like you're just looking to get experiences.
Right. That's it. And just opening those doors.
That's right.
Yeah. Opening
people, professors. And I think that's how we have to look. The classes are like a Diet Coke version of an experience.
Sure.
I mean, classes have value.
Right.
Contextually, but we have to get students in a more experiential environment where they're really grappling with ideas of not just the content, but self, community, globalization, their place in this global world, because that's the reality of what they're entering.
Right.
And that's what we need to think about.
Yeah. I mean, we've never been more interconnected. Yeah.
You can get anywhere in the world in 24 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. Like, take a moment and think about, talk about context. Like 100 years ago, you weren't getting on a plane, right? You weren't flying in a jet. Maybe if you did get on a plane, it wasn't going far, and you'd be lucky if it made it. But like, can you imagine what awaits us in 50 years? And it might not be flight or whatever, but we don't even know.
Right.
Like, and we said this before, like literally we're holding devices that are more powerful than the computers that landed a human on the moon.
Yep.
And we break those devices and screens. We turn them over like yearly. Like, it's like with casual carelessness, we have this incredible power. So I think the more we can broaden and enrich the experiences outside of the classroom in a way that connects to the experiences within, the better students will be for it. Just as people, not just intellectuals, but human beings, friends, family members, and one day husband, wives, parents, and all the things that they're, all the different places and people that they'll be.
Community connections. So I've already seen the Harris Project in action. I've seen coalition or the CARE Coalition. So if you can just tell me, as well as the audience, what these organizations are. I mean, obviously each one is different, but again, if there's, an overall summary of what they are or what they do, because I would love to see these organizations, as I've seen them in action so far with the presentations or whatnot, fundraising events. I would love to see more people take advantage of it, and I don't think they really are aware that these programs or these organizations exist.
Yeah, and I think that goes also to that earlier point. Like, we need to do a better job of not streamlining, but being more purposeful in our relationship with these organizations. So each of them is interesting because it sort of has a niche place within regionally, and some even more broadly on topics related to mental health and wellness. So the Harris Project in particular looks, one of the primary focuses beyond addiction is co-occurring disorders. So looking at the relationship between addiction and mental health and how these coexist. Like, you don't just treat the addiction, you have to also acknowledge the mental health piece.
Yeah.
And by treating both of those, you'll have healthier individuals. So they have actually just released or piloted a curriculum that they piloted here. We were one of their host sites, and in partnership with Pace University. So that is their work primarily. Care Coalition is also about student health and well-being, and that is really like a Eastchester-based group, and they do a lot in terms of creating events, experiences, speakers. They also have like scholarships and opportunities to highlight examples of students' well-being, to promote well-being, healthy choices. JCK Foundation is another group that we work with. They actually are sort of on the west side of the county, but we've used them. There's a lot of overlap here, but we've actually used them particularly to build out our ninth grade transition program.
Okay.
So they've met exclusively at this point with ninth graders.
Gotcha.
And and I think this is a wise move. We've seen them as a way to support that transition, and then it's not like we have all this overlapping work.
Right. Well, on that note, is the function of these organizations for the students to get involved with, or is the function of these organizations to help work with you and the admins behind the scenes in order to facilitate whatever it's trying to facilitate within the learning environment?
Well, I don't think that's the function of the organizations. That is their origin story. I think it's our relationship with the organizations, which is important. Like, how do we see we want to have them? Do we want our students to be doing internships with them? Do we want them to be messaging on a topic? Do we want them to be sharing a particular set of expertise? In some ways, it's all of the above.
Okay.
But I think we have to be very thoughtful with this because it can become overwhelming. The other piece is the Lukumi Foundation, which works a lot with service, and they generally work with our younger students, like a lot of kids at Ann Hutch and in the middle school. We're actually hosting their Global Good Deeds conference on the 25th when we come back. It's almost like a TED Talk over that Friday morning, and then also hosting the launch of their book event. They do a lot with our students around service, which is such a key piece, in my opinion, of well-being, right? Having sense of purpose. So all of these organizations are different. I think it's sort of, what I was amazed with is the fact that all of these exist. They're all have relationships with Eastchester. They all are very excited to work with us, our students, our staff. And now the work is thinking about, okay, how can we be in relation with them in a way that is productive to our own goal and ends.
Right.
And I think up till now, usually, like, if someone reaches out to you, if you think it's good, you're like, yeah, let's see what comes of this. Now we know there's energy there, there's money, there's resources. Now I think we can be like, oh, JCK, will you work with our ninth graders? You guys have a great message for transition. Oh, CODA or the Harris Project, can you really work with our health classes? I think like
Gotcha.
your work around mental health and addiction is like spot on. We'd love to have you in that 10th grade health class and with those students. The Lukumi Foundation, will you help us build out our service learning components, right? We don't have any service learning piece. We've got all this great stuff with these elementary school students, but we'd love to offer maybe like some alternative spring break trips at the high school. So that's the next step.
Gotcha.
It's like the relationships are strong. I think we've invested in them. I know I have connected with each of these groups, but now we have to think with more particularity, I guess, about how we want to go forward in those relationships.
Awesome. Yeah, that paints a clear picture for what the school district's involvement with these organizations, or what you said, the relationship with these organizations and what it's providing, and yeah, that's another valuable, from however which way they're contributing. Or to kind of steal from Chris Welsh's example the other night, it's like we have all of these individuals arriving at our house with different, like, we've got a plumber showing up, we've got like a painter, we've got like, we want to make sure they're doing what they do best, right,
in helping us make this home or this foundation stronger.
Sure.
Not just like, hey, you're here, why don't you paint?
What's very interesting is that with what you were talking about, where, this organization can help with the health class, this organization can help with the transition, it seems as if those relationships are constantly evolving, where, when something might pop up, or, if something's on the radar, then the organization, it's almost as if, all right, let's explore what the organization can provide. I mean, obviously, we're very well aware of what they can do, but to have them, to have the relationship with them if something pops up,
Well, that's the other piece, right? Like, and I can't remember if we said this earlier, but it's like, you don't start meditating when you're in crisis. You have the practice to take you through crisis. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with these relationships. You don't build the friendships, in the times you're in crisis. Like, you have these relationships, so when you do need support, they're there. And we have so many relationships. I mean, it's not to dwell too much on this piece. I mean, there was some deep tragedy this year. And what was just really heartwarming was to see the ways even like individuals at Yale from Ruler reached out. Like, all of these people, Care Coalition, everyone was reaching out. Can we provide you with therapists? Do you need grief counselors? Like, what can we offer? And that speaks volumes both to this community, but to the relationships they've nurtured. So, of course, there's the specific work that they do, but then there is the general work we collectively do. And I think when we're in something like this together with a shared vision, it's that bond that can help us through those unexpected and challenging moments.
Yeah.
In any school, and the schools are a reflection of life more than anything. I mean, we're not exempt from tragedy or grief or loss and celebration and life. All of those things, the whole gamut of life unfolds within a school. Yeah. And I think acknowledging that and these relationships help us through that.
Dr. Meyer.
Till we meet again on the journey, my friend. Till we meet again.
This was incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was awesome.
Everybody, thank you so much.